I've uploaded at least one video with extremely high yield content every day for the past 30 days. Well, actually, this is video number 32. Now we will do some high yield questions from those videos for Step 2 CK review. Let's begin. A 43-year-old woman presents with fever and dysuria. She is known to have hypertension and diabetes mellitus type 2. Exam reveals suprapubic tenderness. What is the most likely cause of this patient's symptoms? So when you look at the options, you can see that all of them are oral hypoglycemics. So that means we have to know the side effects or mechanism of action of these drugs. So this patient is presenting with fever and dysuria. So maybe she has a UTI. Now we have to find out which one of these options cause UTIs. A. Exenatide. B. Metformin. C. Glyburide. D. Dapagliflozin. And the answer is option D, dapagliflozin. So this was discussed in my high yield pharmacology review. If you haven't seen it, make sure you do. So let's take a look at what was said in that video. So that was fact number 48. Which anti-diabetic drugs increase the risk of UTIs? And the answer is SLG2 inhibitors. And how you can remember this is that these drugs have flow. So how I remember it is like the flow of urine, and they cause UTIs. Therefore, this patient was most likely taking an SLG2 inhibitor. A 27-year-old woman who is currently 19 weeks pregnant presents for a checkup. While taking her history, she reveals that her brother, who she has been in close contact with, was hospitalized yesterday due to meningitis. What drugs are best for prophylaxis? And this question requires you to know the prophylactic management for exposure to meningitis. And this was discussed in part 1 of my high yield pharmacology review. So let's take a closer look at the options. A. Rifampin. B. Ciprofloxacin. Or C. Ceftriaxone. So all of these drugs can be used in the prophylactic treatment of meningitis or exposure to meningitis, but not all of them are safe for women who are pregnant. So the answer here is option C, ceftriaxone. Let's look at a flashback. So in the high yield pharmacology review, fact number 18 says, what is the prophylactic management for exposure to meningitis? And the answers included ciprofloxacin, rifampin, as well as ceftriaxone and azithromycin. But the thing is, the drugs in red are not safe to use in pregnant women, while the drugs in green are safe for use in pregnant women. That's why the answer in the previous question was ceftriaxone. A woman presents to her postpartum checkup. She reveals that she's having right-sided breast pain. Exam reveals right-sided breast tenderness and a temperature of 101. What is the best treatment option for this patient? A. Ciprofloxacin and continued breastfeeding. B. Nafcillin and continued breastfeeding. Or C. Decloxacillin and discontinued breastfeeding. So this clinical vignette is describing a woman that more likely has mastitis, as evidenced by her right-sided or unilateral breast pain, as well as her fever and breast tenderness. And of course, she is in the postpartum period, so she's probably breastfeeding. So if we look at the options here, we can rule out option A because ciprofloxacin is not commonly used in the treatment of mastitis. However, nafcillin and decloxacillin are used in the treatment of mastitis. So the big question here is, are patients that have mastitis able to continue breastfeeding? And the answer is yes. So that makes option B the correct answer. Nafcillin and continued breastfeeding. And if you're liking this content so far, be sure to power up the like button. A 22-year-old male presents with a history of hematuria for 2 days. He had an upper respiratory tract infection 10 days ago that was treated with antibiotics. His blood pressure is currently 151/82. Exam shows periorbital edema. What will lab results reveal? A. Elevated anti-DNase B titer, B. IgG autoantibodies, or C. Elevated IgA. So in this patient, the top 2 differential diagnoses would be IgA nephropathy or post-strep glomerulonephritis. So those are both type 3 hypersensitivity reactions. So that means option B is definitely not the answer. So option A relates to post-strep glomerulonephritis, while option C relates to IgA nephropathy. So which is the answer? Well, in this case, the answer is option A. These can be easily confused, but I discuss them more in this video right here. Basically, how we can differentiate between these two is by the timing of onset of the hematuria. So it took 10 days after a previous infection. So that is more in line with post-strep glomerulonephritis, because in IgA nephropathy, that is more acute. So that occurs within 5 days. So that's how we remember IgA nephropathy. IgA, the A for acute and the A for adults. Because remember that IgA nephropathy is the most common nephropathy in adults, especially males in their 20s and 30s. Other key findings of post-strep glomerulonephritis include an elevated antistreptolysin O and a decreased complement level. A 56-year-old male who has a history of dysphagia and rapid weight loss just did a upper GI endoscopy. 2 hours after the procedure, his vitals are respiratory rate 15, temperature 98, and blood pressure 89/60. What is the best diagnostic procedure to reveal the cause of these symptoms? A. Chest X-ray, B. Water-soluble contrast, or C. CT scan. So this question brings out a lot of high yield points. So this patient has a history of dysphagia. It's very important to note that all patients that have dysphagia have to undergo an upper GI endoscopy eventually. Yes, they might do manometry or a barium swallow prior, but an upper GI endoscopy should always be done. Why? Because we have to rule out red flag causes such as esophageal cancer, stomach cancer. However, when these patients undergo instrumentation of the esophagus, this can result in esophageal rupture. We should always suspect this in patients who are acutely ill or hypotensive, like in this patient with a blood pressure of 89/60. So if this patient is hypotensive after an upper GI endoscopy, then we have to consider an esophageal rupture. And in these patients, the next best step is a water-soluble contrast. So the answer here is option B. A 26-year-old woman just gave birth at 37 weeks gestation. Labor was induced because she had a blood pressure of 190/110, and she had a tonic-clonic seizure lasting 3 minutes. She was given medication to prevent further seizures. If the level of this drug is too high, what will be the first sign? A. Respiratory paralysis, B. hyporeflexia, or C, headache. So it is highly possible that this patient has eclampsia, and the clinical vignette mentions that she was given a medication to prevent further seizures. So in this case, magnesium sulfate is usually given to prevent seizures. So it's asking, what's the first sign of magnesium toxicity? And this is option B, hyporeflexia. So hyporeflexia is usually the first sign, but other signs that they can have are nausea, vomiting, and headaches. Respiratory paralysis is a late finding of magnesium toxicity. We have to be very careful in using magnesium in patients that have renal failure or some sort of renal impairment, because magnesium sulfate is renally cleared. So having any renal impairment can increase the risk of you having magnesium toxicity. So oftentimes the dose of magnesium is lowered, and these patients have to be monitored very closely. A 10-year-old boy presents with hematuria and a purple rash on his thighs. What vaccine should be avoided in patients with this condition? So we're not really given much here to work with, but the rash is pretty distinct. That purple rash on his thighs could be due to Henoch-Schönlein purpura, where palpable purpura on the thighs and buttocks are very specific for this condition. So this question is asking, what vaccine should be avoided in patients with Henoch-Schönlein purpura? A, rotavirus, B, influenza, C, MMR, or D, Hib. So in this question, the answer is option A, rotavirus. And this is because patients with Henoch-Schönlein purpura have an increased chance of developing intussusception. And recall that intussusception is a primary reason for not giving the rotavirus vaccine. A 22-year-old male presents with nausea, fever, and right-sided scrotal swelling. Exam reveals right ipsilateral scrotal tenderness. What may physical exam reveal? A, enlargement of superficial inguinal nodes, B, enlargement of axillary lymph nodes, or C, enlargement of cervical lymph nodes. So this question requires us to know about lymph drainage, which I went through very thoroughly in this video. But what you have to know to answer this question correctly is that everything south of the umbilicus drains to the superficial inguinal nodes, except the pairs, like the pair of ovaries, the pair of kidneys, the pair of testes, which drain to the para-aortic nodes. But as you can see, the para-aortic nodes are not an option in this question. So honestly, I'm even making this easier for you. But that's because, yes, the testes are drained by the para-aortic nodes, but the scrotum, they are drained by the superficial inguinal nodes. So the answer is A, enlargement of superficial inguinal nodes. A 20-year-old female presents for an annual exam. She has no complaints. While taking her history, she reveals that she enjoys playing video games by herself. She avoids spending time with her family. She prefers to spend time alone because she feels better when she is alone. What is the most likely diagnosis? A, social anxiety disorder, B, schizoid personality disorder, C, avoidant personality disorder, or D, schizotypal personality disorder. So what we can tell from this case is that this patient likes to be alone and they prefer to be alone. They aren't afraid of rejection or people not liking them. It's her choice. So the answer here is option B, schizoid personality disorder. So, schizoid and schizotypal personality disorders both belong to type A personality disorders. We can distinguish between them because schizotypal, schiz, odd type. They are the odd type. They dress in clothes that aren't in line with like societal norms. While in schizoid, they are alone, they want to be alone, that is their choice, that is their happy place. For avoidance personality disorder, they are alone, but they actually do want friends, they do want companionship, but they're just afraid of that rejection from other people. So the answer is option B. Guys, if you're really liking this high yield review, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and comment below what other videos you'd like to see. Okay, let's move on to the next question. A 37-year-old man presents due to a change in his body habitus. Exam reveals loss of adipose tissue in his face and extremities, with notable increase in abdominal girth. What is the mechanism of action of the drug that caused this finding? A. Inhibition of HIV integrase. B. Inhibition of the pol gene. C. Binds to reverse transcriptase with the help of thymidine kinase. So this question requires you to know about antiretroviral drugs. So this clinical vignette is describing a patient with lipodystrophy. So lipodystrophy is a common complication of protease inhibitors. So the answer here is option B, inhibition of the pol gene. But how do we know this? And that's because of my high yield video right here. Seriously guys, I've uploaded so much high yield content, it's insane. And to do it all in 30 days, like wow. So be sure to check out all of that content so you don't miss any points or any high yield tips on your exam. But let's take a closer look at this mnemonic for antiretrovirals. So, like I said before, the answer was protease inhibitors. How we can remember this is by saying P never goes uphill. Kind of like P never goes uphill. So, the P stand for protease inhibitor, pol gene inhibition, and prevention of maturation. So the P's tell us what drug class we're dealing with and the mechanism of action of that drug. Never relates to the names of the drugs, like indinavir, ritonavir. Those are all protease inhibitors. And Hill refers to the complications. H, hyperglycemia. I, GI intolerance. L, lipodystrophy. And that brings us to the end of my 30-second upload for the month of December. So starting next week, you can look forward to consistent uploads every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I will continue to strive to make more high yield and more engaging content here at MD Powerhouse, where medical information is free and medical information is easy. If you like this content, be sure to power up the like button, hit subscribe, and that notification bell. To continue learning more, click this video right here. Click it now. Okay, thank you. Bye.